Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Managed Methods webinar today. We'll get going here and give folks a chance to get logged in. We just went live here. Greetings. Good morning to some of you in the Western United States. It's 11 o'clock Mountain Time here in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm headquartered. And good afternoon for those of you in the central and eastern part of the United States or wherever else you may be joining us from. But happy Wednesday, March 1st. Wow. It's hard to believe that we've already fast forwarded 2 months of the year, and that January and February are now in the rearview mirror. And we are almost a quarter away through this lap around the sun for 2023. I'm going to be your moderator today, folks. One moment, I'm going to get our presentation back up to where the beginning was. I apologize, I didn't have my slides all set up. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'll just ask real quick, Charles, can you see my screen? Is it up there?
Yep, I can see that just fine there.
All righty, okay. Well, again, good morning or good afternoon, folks, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us today. My name is David Waugh. I am with Managed Methods, and we are going to have a discussion today about why it's important that you need to have a safety and security audit in your Google and Microsoft environment on your project checklist. So I still see attendees popping in, so we'll go ahead and just kind of gently move forward here in today's audit. Just a couple housekeeping items. We are going to be recording this event, so it is recording right now. So all registrants and participants will receive a recording of this webinar. Usually takes about 24 hours or so for us to be able to get those things out of Zoom and get that out to you folks. But you will get a copy of today's presentation. Any questions that you may have for myself or the other panelists in today's webinar, please feel free to put those into the Q&A, and we will address those as we reach the end of today's session. Also, just for attendance purposes, so you know, everyone is muted, but feel free to ask your questions in the chat and Q&A window, and we will do our best to address those. So let's talk about the quick agenda for today, where we're going to go. We're going to just set the stage a little bit here, talk about, you know, what is the cloud audit that we see from our perspective here at Managed Methods, and why is it important that you do one in your environment, and you know what you should look for, and then we're going to get into a live demonstration with our platform and our panelists, and then we'll have Q&A as we wrap things up. So hopefully you have a cup of coffee or a bottle of water and a comfortable chair, and we'll go ahead and get going. So why is a Google and Microsoft audit important? And we'll talk about Google Workspace, Gmail, Drive, shared drives, third-party apps, file sharing, etc. We'll talk about Microsoft 365 in the environment of your Exchange Online email boxes, Outlook.com, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, etc. So the audit is used in a lot of different terms, and in some cases, people might be thinking about audits in looking at settings, or maybe it's an audit about, you know, doing pen testing to find out, are there ways that people can get into our network. So there's a lot of different ways you look at audits from a cybersecurity perspective, whether it be from a settings perspective, do we have the proper settings and thresholds, and do we have the right protections? It may be looking at access. In our case here at Managed Methods, we talk about a safety and cybersecurity audit of your Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 environments. The environments in which every day, all the time, your staff and your students are communicating with each other in and out of the district, whether it be on email, whether it's through file shares, whether it's through video collaboration or conferencing tools like this. It could be Google Meet, it could be Zoom, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be Cisco WebEx. So we look at it from the cloud layer. So we here at Managed Methods, we reside in the cloud layer of Google, Microsoft, Zoom, etc. Some folks may know the term CASB, or Cloud Access Security Broker. That's a term that is used in the commercial enterprise world. And so that's where we reside, is at that cloud layer. So today specifically, we're going to talk about why it's important you also conduct an audit at this layer. Now, you should be conducting audits at every single layer within your cloud stack, your on-premise technology stacks. You should look at infrastructure, network, endpoint, all those different areas. But a lot of times when we work with school districts, they have not yet done a comprehensive audit in the cloud stack. So what is that cloud audit that we're talking about, and what is it we're going to be diving into here in today's discussion? Well, a periodic look at what's going on, whether you have a technology in place like a managed methods where you can have this constantly being done and happening with you, whether you take advantage of our free offer to do a risk and safety scan in your environment, or whether you use some of the native tools that are right out of the box with Google and or Microsoft. It's important that you take a look at these things. And so what are some of the risks that we will talk about today as we look into things? It could be things like shadow IT, third-party applications that you don't know have been granted an OAuth token in your environment. It could be, making sure that person identifiable information of your staff or your student data is not inadvertently being shared through public links. It could be copyright protected information, compromised accounts, you name it. And of course, always looking into the cybersecurity threats of who's using unauthorized VPNs, or do we have potential phishing, all sorts of stuff that can come into the environment and you need to take a look at. So why is the cloud audit important? Well, that's what we're going to talk about with our panelists today, and that's where we're going to dive in. And we're going to get into this to understand, what are the types of risks and security gaps that are presented out there, and then look at how you might create or modify some of your existing practices and make sure that the audit is built into that process in your day-to-day at your district. Please note too that Google and Microsoft are not doing this for you on your behalf, and they're not responsible to do this. And this is something that, I just came back from a conference this week. I was out in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had somebody ask me, they're like, well, we're running in Google in our workspace environment. We also have Microsoft on our staff accounts. Aren't they doing this kind of thing for us and letting us know, if we have any security gaps? And the answer is no. So it's your responsibility to take this initiative, and whether you do it on your own, you partner with somebody, you bring in a service to help you with that. That's why it's important to make sure you're doing these things in your environment. So let's jump into some of that. I am pleased today to have some distinguished guests with me here on today's webinar. Of course, I have with me my colleague, Mr. Charles Mogan, who's product specialist extraordinaire. And Charles is going to be sharing his screen and leading a hands-on demonstration of our product to talk about some of these subjects with our panelists. So I have with me Mr. Ross Randall and Mr. Tony Schlorff. I'm going to have Tony, Ross, why don't you guys introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your district and your role. Tony, I'll jump in and have you go first.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Tony Schlorff. I'm the proud Director of Technology Services over at Township High School District 214. We are the largest high school only district in the state of Illinois. If you don't know about the state of Illinois, we have 868 different school districts, all different sizes, layouts. It's all sorts of crazy. But we've got about 12,000 total students, all high school. We have 6 comprehensive buildings and then a 7th building, which is our specialized schools. We encompass about 10 different municipalities or villages. You probably maybe have heard right now the Bears might be moving into our boundaries, so that's kind of a coming thing. So I'm excited to be on here with you guys.
Ross, I don't know. You got to follow that one up. He talked about the Chicago Bears.
I don't have any bear stores or anything like that. Hi guys, I'm Ross Randall. I'm with the Lamar County School District in Mississippi. Lamar County sits in between Jackson and the Gulf Coast, if you're familiar with that area. We're a medium-sized school district, probably larger in the state of Mississippi. I've got it's a K-12 school district. We have 17 schools throughout the district. I've got about 11,000 students, K-12 in the district. We are one-to-one, so every single student has a Chromebook that they are issued. So and we're really heavy with technology, always have been as far as the school district, and we use it a lot. It's really embedded into our curriculum, so it's not something that's just used for a little bit here and there. It's part of what we do. So it's very important to us to make sure that that all the data that is being shared and what's going on in the back end of the network and the systems is protected, and that we're looking out for the best interest of the students. And that's my main goal. I've been doing this for about 18 years. So I've been through the whole cycle back when the only thing we had to worry about 18 years ago was if the internet was up or down. That was it. And our jobs have changed tremendously. I know Tony, if he's been around a little while, he can attest to this. Now we're expected to be security experts, network experts, but not just a regular flat network. I mean, school district networks are completely crazy. Compared to a lot of other districts. It's very complicated. I'm sure we'll get into this, but the tools needed to make sure those environments run smooth and are secure there's not one tool out there that does it all. You've got to layer these things. And for us, Managed Method was a fantastic addition to get that security piece, kind of the gap that we were missing there. So very excited to be here and very excited to be a partner with Managed Methods.
Well, Ross, thank you so much. Tony, thank you for joining us as well today. It's a good thing I'm working from the solar system today, because otherwise on my bookshelf, Tony, you'd see all the Green Bay Packer helmets. So, don't hold that against me. Hopefully, Chicago moves that stadium, so that helps change the mojo. But I know I'm going to get a lot of grief from some people in the audience that I know that that know me. So, anyways, well, Ross, thanks for joining us. When you said you're out there on the Gulf, I looked behind you there, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know they moved the Golden Gate Bridge down to Mississippi. So we're glad.
I'm just saying you don't want to see what's behind me. So I'm just saying.
Well, I hear you can get some good fish and chips down there. So. So that was a shout out for a friend of ours that's in the audience out there today that knows where to find the good fish and chips in the Houston area. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this. And Ross, I'm going to stay with you, and then we'll bounce back over to you, Tony, because Ross, you mentioned obviously you work here with Managed Methods. You do as well, Tony. But let's talk, and I'm going to throw this question out there with both you folks, and then we're going to have Charles bring on some things, and as we talk through them, Charles can interact with you guys, and we can talk about the product. So. Charles, I'll go ahead and stop sharing if you want to get ready to bring the product up on the screen. So Ross and Tony, again, I'll come to you with this. In general, what would you say are the top key differences, if you would, between life before Managed Methods and now you have Managed Methods? And as you think about this in this term of, obviously you both went through the initial audit, because how does everyone become a partner with Managed Methods? You guys started in the same fashion as all of our customers do, and that is you take advantage of the free risk and safety audit. Essentially, it's a free trial of our product. So we'll start with you, Ross, and tell us a little bit, before you learned about Managed Methods, how did you maybe go about these things, and then how are you going about conducting ways that you look for risk and audit, and then we'll get into the specific areas in a minute.
Yep, a lot of what we did was it was more reactive. So we would be made aware of an issue, whether it's a compromised account, the PII sharing, things like that we really didn't have a good view of. You can do a lot of this stuff in the paid version of the Google Workspace, but it's not as clean. We're taxed. Tony can probably attest to this. We're not experts in any. I'm not an expert in any one field, much less security, and being able to manage all this. And to have a single pane of glass that gives me insight into all of these different issues that could be potentially a compromising situation or an issue with a student's health and safety, then it's just invaluable to have that in a single pane of glass, to be able to log in, have the alerts coming through. You just don't have that, that I found anywhere else in an interface that is just drop dead easy to use. And that being said, I don't have time to learn I don't, it's like, I just don't have time to learn it. I'm older. I've been doing this a long time. I'm not going back to school to get a security a degree. I'm just not. So I need things that help me see those issues as quick as possible, and also put things in there that work as a gateway to stop them before they even start. And this fit the bill. It's just perfect. And there may be other solutions out there that do certain things, but I'm telling you, these guys at Managed Methods, they make it so easy. The product works great. The support is fantastic. And I'm not saying that just because you guys have me on a webinar. I'm truly mean that, because I'm real picky about the partners that I work with and the products that I bring in to secure my students. That's my passion. Everything I do is about making sure these students are safe and that they're being educated. And so I'm pretty picky about what I allow to come in. And so this is a great product for exactly what I needed it to do.
Well, I think that's a good segue over to you, Tony, because, like Ross, I know you are heavily involved with not only regional COSIN and networking chapters and organizations, but at a national level. And I know, Ross's history, because before Ross became a customer, we were pointed out that, hey, Lamar County is a real tough customer, tough cookie, if you would, Ross. You knew you had that reputation. And it was, hey, if you want to get involved in their regional chapter, you got to win over the leadership. And Tony, you and I were introduced kind of in a similar fashion through COSIN. So, what was your life like before and now that you brought Managed Methods in, when you look at this from this kind of holistic audit and control standpoint, first and foremost?
Sure. So David, it's interesting to think, right? Like, Ross said it, if I've been around, and I still think I'm like, I just started my career last year, but, I started my career as a high school math teacher about 20 years ago. And I've been in the tech world, specifically the CTO, director of tech, for about 11 years. And as I was reflecting on this question, I go, that's really when Google started coming out with their Google for Education, was like 2012, 2011, 2012. So 12 years ago. And at that time, everybody was just excited that, oh, we're going to get all of this stuff and they're not charging us for anything. And we never really had the ability to sit down and think, okay, how are we using this for? Oh, it can just be shared. Well, what data are we putting in that? We didn't really think about that, 11 years ago, because it was, oh, here's a great way that you can access your files everywhere. You can use Gmail as a work email. You can, all of these different things. And now we don't, as on the tech side in education, where we do wear many, many, many hats, we don't have to worry about, ensuring that our file servers are, accessible outside, that they're secure, that it's all of these different things. So thinking of how much it's progressed over the 12 years that really Google's been out there, obviously Google's now charging for just about everything with it, but it's kind of also shows exactly where Managed Methods came in for us. And that is as Google has expanded, so is their administrative panel. And it is not easy to use, in my opinion. I've got amazing staff here, and my Google admin, James, who may be on this webinar as well, but he does all of this stuff for us. And he was like, Tony, I'm spending so much time and energy trying to find stuff in this Google admin panel. Whereas when we were looking at you guys after the audit, you guys were able to show us stuff that we wouldn't even know how to pull those audits from Google, let alone how to remedy this stuff, let alone and I know we're going to talk about like some of the risks out there or the third-party app connections that we didn't even know were happening. We were assuming it, but we couldn't see it and deal with it quickly. Mm-hmm. So what you guys have really done for us is not only show us this, give us a platform that is super user-friendly, but then what Ross said, I can't echo it enough. Like, you guys have, standing meetings with my team to ensure that not only are we getting what we need, but walking us through we've seen this in other districts. Let's put this rule in place. Let's look at this risk. This is, something that we really recommend. And that has really turned it from Google being this massive unknown just mess to now we actually have our arms around it. And when we look at that security onion, there is such a big stake of information in this Google area or cloud stack area that we've got, that we still need to understand where it's at and where it's going to make sure that we're doing our due diligence of protecting all of our students and staff and their privacy. So you guys have really taken it from this big, massive mess into something that, you know, is concise, easy, and actionable, which with the number of things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, having something quick, easy, and actionable is key.
Well, I think, you know, that you guys have both kind of summarized it pretty well, and I've already seen some folks asking a few questions, but you know, that was our goal that we set out to do, was really to help you folks be able to manage all of the different things going on in the environments within Google Workspace, Microsoft 365. And I think, Tony, you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head in that a lot has changed in the last decade, but especially just in the last 3 or 4 years. The world got turned upside down, you know, in 2020. And the two of you, I know, were front and center there. We were all in that together, and that, you know, the world as we knew it changed drastically. And probably for the first time in a long time, the education world really had to change its thinking and of how we did our day-to-day business. Tools like Google Workspace, though, were invaluable, and Microsoft 365 Online to allowing us to continue that, but it opened up our eyes to more security and safety vulnerabilities, because we no longer could rely on that traditional secured and hardened network perimeter that was, say, the school's, you know, local area network or the wide area network through the Wi-Fi. And it opened up a playing field to more possibilities, you know, and now that we can continue to operate, whether we're physically in schools and classrooms together, or whether we're still connecting through virtual schools and virtual settings like this. But, you know, it also changed, like you talked about. You know, Microsoft's always pretty much been Microsoft in terms of, you know, they've moved things to the cloud, but they've always had different tools and licensing layers and, you know, A1, A3, A5. But you're right, Google went through a major change where it used to be Google and it was free. And then, you know, there was lackluster tools and you know, maybe they didn't have a lot of stuff there. So then they brought Google Enterprise, which is now Legacy plus different names out there. But then they brought that forward from the commercial side. But, you know, as you've shared, Tony, and you know, Ross, we've talked about it in many of our clients, and I'm sure many people in today's webinar, while there's some very powerful feature and functionality free out of the box with both Google and Microsoft, and then there's some very, very powerful paid features, you do have to have knowledge and know-how to use these things. They're not intuitive. They're not simple, straightforward out of the box. What we can accomplish, as you'll see here in a few moments, with just a few clicks, can be a 20 to 30 to 40-minute exercise using, say, Investigation Tool or Data Query Studio. There's a lot of challenges. So please know that Google has these capabilities. Microsoft has these capabilities. Not everything we can do, but they do have very powerful tools out of the box. We encourage you should look at those. And if you have those, reach out to your peers, reach out to us. We'll help you figure out how to use those. But what we are trying to help showcase today is that we've tried to package it into a out-of-the-box, intuitive, purpose-built for K-12 education, not a product that used to be called Enterprise and we just simply changed the name and brought it over to education. We have purposely built a product that was designed for the K-12 audience in mind, whether you're a big school or a small school. Charles has brought up the product on the screen, and let's jump into some of these scenarios. So one of the big areas that, you know, Ross, Tony, I know you're both aware of, third-party applications, especially in the Google world, have become the new shadow IT. And we saw over the last few years when the global pandemic impacted our world, a number of third-party based applications, extensions, et cetera, that were in use in a school district, say, in 2019 and 2020, compared to the number of cloud applications and extensions that are used today, quadrupled. It just was an explosion of apps. Tony, I'm going to stick with you, and then we'll jump back to you, Ross. So you talked about that, Tony, a little bit there. In that, first off, the mess that was the bigger mess, and then even knowing where to go. So before we brought managed methods to your district, did you have an accounting and audit of the third-party apps that had access to your environment? And I know in Illinois, SOPA has gone into effect. So maybe share with the audience a little bit about your view on that before and after managed methods and how this helped you with SOPA.
Yeah, absolutely. So the SOPA law here in Illinois is a Student Online Data Privacy Protection something. So student data protection. And basically we have to have a signed agreement with every single app or vendor or website that collects any type of student information on file with, to be compliant with that. But one of the biggest things that's helped with is really kind of rein in exactly, David, what you're talking about. And kind of going back to what I was initially talking about with the big mess of, okay, well, now everybody's got a Google account over the past 10 years. We've also seen the sign in with Google. We've seen the add the extension. And I don't know if it's just me and the folks that I've got, but nobody ever reads the next part that pops up and says, this is the information that you are now sharing with Google. So we had a list and we would pull it and keep an eye on it here and there beforehand. But there was nothing that we were really able to do systemically that was able to give us a nice, neat, quick way to see it. So as I told you, my Google admin, he now on a daily, weekly basis goes in and checks the apps. And because of managed methods and specifically the support that the team has given us, that scope categories, which I know Charles will show us here in a bit, but that scope categories, and then seeing like, okay, what are the really bad ones that we need to take a quick action on? And I love in the upper right corner, and you can see it on Charles's screen, that access level. So I've actually got our instant open over here, knowing that, if it's got a score of 61, it can read and write emails. And so for us, we now have, sitting down working anytime that we have something that is, above our certain threshold, which, we try to keep under double digits, we can quickly remediate it. And now what Managed Methods is able to do for us is, when my team sees this stuff, we can actually be proactive, and instead of having to remediate it, we can start blocking, the don't allow sign-ins that, do X, Y, and Z. But it's also given us the ability to really have the conversations with the end users of saying, hey, I've seen you used your district account for this. Do you know that it can send or, write emails for you? And is that what you want? I mean, we'll eventually get them to that. We're not going to allow that, but, we can at least have that conversation of what were you trying to accomplish here? And now let's have a collaborative piece between, what you're trying to do in the classroom and us trying to keep everything safe. So it's really ensured that we're able to, be compliant with SOPA, because we can quickly see if there's stuff that we don't have an agreement with, but B, also just a better handle on who's using what and what haven't we gone in and suppressed, knowing that there's things always being added. So again, really a nice clean way to say, yep, this stuff is good versus, oh, we really got to take a look at it. David, I think you're still on mute there. I can do a sign.
Sorry, my mouse was frozen up and I couldn't get the unmute button to work. So it is SOPPA, SOPA. It is the Student Online Personal Protection Act of Illinois. I know both Tony and I immediately were trying to think in our mind the acronym. Okay, what does that all stand for? Thank you for sharing that and diving into that. So Ross, we're going to stay on the same topic, third-party apps, and what's the take and how you guys took a handle on this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, about 10 years ago, whenever we issued student accounts across the board, we did not have the ability, we didn't have apps or extensions blocked. So it was wild, wild west for honestly a few years. And once I realized, whoa, that, this is a little out of control, because, kids are going to download every little game and every little extension. And so we did block that at one point and stopped that and only allowed approved apps. Well, at that point, the apps that were already on the students' accounts, those were still out there. They just couldn't install anymore. And I didn't realize how many it was until we put this in and I started looking at it. And it was incredible. So I was able to use managed methods to go through and disallow all of those apps with pretty much one click, and they was just done. And so all of those apps were removed. So now I know I have complete control over what apps and extensions are allowed, within my district. So, I mean, that right there was such a huge thing. And I'll say this too, we did find, this helped me find, and this happens. So you have people that develop these apps and extensions. Well, they go out of business and they leave it, and it's still attached, and those apps can get hacked. And when they get hacked, then people have access to whatever access that app has or whatever the user gave them. That's a huge issue. And if you don't know what's on your devices or what's tied to your accounts, then you really have no idea what data is getting pushed in and pushed out. So to have this, to be able to look at that really quick to see what, if anything weird pops up. Let's say that an app was authenticated at one point and it changed its permissions, and somebody that I had already approved, they accept the new changes. Well, now the app has the ability to send an email. No, we don't want that. We don't have any, we don't want any of that. We just, pretty much all the apps we have that I allow, they just basically can do an SSO login or something like that. We don't want them to pass any data back and forth, or they have access maybe to upload a document from Google Drive. Things like that are, are okay, but I'm still very hesitant with things because, used to K-12, we were pretty much left alone. We're targets now. We are direct targets because the data that we have is so valuable. The whole ransomware and encrypting all your servers, that's still out there, but it's kind of going away. The money is getting data and ransoming and holding hostage that data, trying to get us to pay. So the data coming in and out is so important, and these apps are a huge part of that, to make sure that the app is not getting data that you don't want it to have.
Well, that's powerful from both of you in that regard. Charles, why don't you give us a real quick overview of what we are looking here? What is the audience seeing for those that are not familiar with this, like Tony and Ross is?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at here is the apps tab of managed methods, and this is where we're looking at the various OAuth tokens. So this is where someone goes out, they find a website, a Chrome extension, an application on their phone, and they decide to use their school issued account to sign in with it and grant that permission. Google always pulls up that window that says, hey, here's what you're accepting permission wise, but exactly as they say, people don't read that stuff. They just
accept, yeah.
Yep, exactly. It's the easy thing to do. So really then there's kind of two major areas we look at applications. There's the access level, and this is of course a really important one. These are the applications that have access into core elements of Google. So this is where they're looking into things like emails, into things like files, even into things like groups and OUs and user profiles and roles. And these are good things to check in on. But email is probably the worst one out there. There are so many applications out there that want access to people's email for a myriad of reasons. This is a really common one we see. Almost every environment we work with runs into racket and cashback, or a various version of it. These shopping applications are really popular with teachers, with students. And the reason these end up in here all the time is because they don't have the most powerful permissions, but they do have the ability to view and manage email messages and settings, which for something like a shopping application for a school district probably doesn't make sense for that to be in your environment. Definitely something you want to keep a close eye on there. But that's probably one of the main permissions types that we see that pop up there are these view and manage emails. And then one of the other areas we run into often with apps are just the various category types. Ross talked about this with things like, hey, there's all these old games and things existing out here that have been authorized at some point. So there's some ways you can use very powerful categories to sort through those applications and see what's out there in the first place. What did people authorize to begin with? Are there things out here we weren't aware of? And these can be all kinds of different things, anything from dating applications to games to all kinds of different things, to even something as simple as a Reddit. We'll see things like this pop up, or TikTok will pop up. So there's a lot of ways we can go through those various app categories as well too, and to clean things up where maybe it's not necessarily the most concerning security permission to start off with, but maybe it's more of a concern where, hey, we don't want our students or our staff to be using these kinds of applications here.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no purpose for shopping apps, gaming apps, personal lifestyle apps on school issued technology or domains. And, unfortunately, we are also tasked with looking at the safety of our human interactions, first and foremost, the kiddos, but protecting those of our staff and employees. And unfortunately, we've seen a rise in apps like OnlyFans, Tinder, Chat, Fansly, a lot of apps that just have no business involved in a school district's organization. And unfortunately, too many people get a little lackadaisical and they use their their school issued credentials on a personal device. Know that we're not looking at people's personal devices. We're not looking at Ross's iPhone and Tony, your, MacBook at home or whatever it may be. We're looking at the school issued domain, and there's no business for people to be using their school issued credentials. And a lot of times, that's what we come across. We see people are using their school issued technology, staff especially, for personal matters. Whether it's a personal application, personal storage of files, tax returns, W-2s, whatever it may be. They're using the Google Drive, the OneDrive, and third-party apps has become kind of the wild, wild west. Yes, there are ways you can go in with Google and Microsoft and change these settings. We can help you get there faster on the front end. Charles, thanks for sharing that. So let's stay on this topic of the risk and continue the audit tour here. So let's move over to the risk tabs, Charles. So the risk area is kind of the centralized spot. Tony and Ross, here we go. You guys know this area is where you spend a lot of time. This is going to be kind of the mothership for the DLP rules, the content we look at and what we go after. So Ross, I'll start with you on this. So there's, obviously, as you know, many, many different types of risk scans that can be accomplished with managed methods. Essentially, for the audience that's not familiar, we look at everything that comes in, out, and through your Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. Emails that come in the door, emails that are going out, file attachments, emails between staff members, staff and students, students to staff, you name it. And then we look at all file shares, files that get uploaded, shares that come in, third-party apps that are installed. So we can then apply advanced content inspection rules to look at everything from show me a credit card number that might be shared freely through the environment, or show me an app, an attachment to an email that might contain a spreadsheet that has, IEPs or personally identifiable information on a student. So we can get very granular in there. So there's many different types of risks that, Ross, we can turn on. Do you have any examples in particular of some risks that have come in very handy risk scans in your organization?
Yes, several. And I'll start off by saying there's not a K-12 school district in the country that doesn't run a web filter for their students. This is a web filter for your environment, for your communication, for your document storage, for your email. We have to do something. If you're, I always tell folks that I meet with, if you're not doing everything you can to protect your staff and students, then you're not doing your job. You've got to do everything that you can. And this is just part of it. The PII is a huge thing for us because, in the past, we really didn't have any control over that. Didn't know what was being sent out, what was coming in. And so the rules around PII have been really instrumental. I've seen a lot of things that were way overshared that we were able to pull back, get people to delete. And also one of the things that has really been helpful is I've got the rule turned on to alert the users when they attempt to send an email that potentially has PII in that email. And that has been wonderful because a lot of folks, they don't think about it. They're going to grab a document that they're going to, going to send to somebody, whether it's the state educational organization or one of these applications that we are partnering with, and they're not thinking about that. Hey, this document has some personal information for students in it, and that they need to go back and trim out what they have in there, what they're sharing. We do have, one thing that has popped up. We in our HR department, we have a lot of emails that are moved back and forth for hiring, even internally, and those a lot of times will have a social security number or something in that document. So those get flagged, and so that's really helped us try to rethink how we're doing that to make sure that we are securing that data. So it's helped by stopping a lot of it, and it's also helped by allowing us an opportunity to train people and help them understand what PII is, and and how what our responsibility is when it comes to that. So that's been really helpful. There's nothing in here that's not helpful. The image search is really great. We've got some other filters in place that we use for web, the web content filtering and stuff. That does catch some things, but nothing as good as what this does. I'm not sure what kind of engine you guys use or AI to look at those pictures, but 9 times out of 10, you guys are spot on with those. And it's very helpful because, if we've got students that are sharing pictures that are inappropriate, then we need to know that really fast, because we need to take care of that. We need to look at that and, get our SROs involved, because potentially you've got child pornography on your hands, and that's a huge issue. And so this has really helped us have a better view of what's going on. It helps us understand exactly what we need to do when we do have that situation. It's been more of a learning tool for us to see, well, how are we going to deal with this? Because in the past, unless they were passing notes around with pictures or, something, we just didn't have to deal with it. It's very relevant now. And so all of these things are things that we should be looking at daily to try to protect our students.
Well, and as I jump over to you, Tony, the last thing you touched on, Ross, SIPA, because you kind of gave the example of, saying that we're similar to a web filter, but we're the web filter into the Google and Microsoft world, whereas a lot of web filter content filters that districts have deployed today are looking at things from the device layer, the browser layer, the network edge. SIPA is governing over all things that are being presented to youth and minor under the age of 18 via the internet. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time that I logged into Google Workspace or Microsoft OneDrive online, I was coming in via a browser over the internet. So if you just alluded to, if inappropriate content and material, especially something that might be deemed pornographic, is shown across your district's Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive to a kiddo under the age of 18, you have a SIPA compliance law that tells you got to do something about that. So, Tony, you're nodding your head over there. I know you got one you want to jump on.
Oh yeah. So it's Russ left it with that. I'm going to pick up right there with that one. So we've actually had a couple times where the image search rules that we've got specifically identified something that we had to bring in the SRO right away. We had some students sharing some pictures. I mean, like I said, we're all high school, so hormones are raging, and you've got all of those things and first dating and stuff like that. So we had an incident at one of our buildings where we got notified as soon as the stuff got shared, and within 30 minutes, we were on the phone with the appropriate administrators and deans. And even though it was happening after hours, we were able to take care of it and start working through some of the bigger pieces of what does that look like. I will say also in the risk, one of the biggest things, and this was very helpful, and it's been even more helpful now that we're starting to see some of the more need around mental health with our students, is our at risk. We have some self-harm risk categories enabled right now, and I know one of our participants even said that the harm reporting has helped a lot. we have been able to intercede in really possibly terrible things. You know, we've had students talking about self-harm, and we were able to hit it off before they even finished the document. You know, that we were already getting a psych and social worker folks there, and every time we get one of those, it's just one that kind of tugs at the heartstrings. But at the same time, it makes me super proud that we're able to provide that student the support that they need in as close to real time as possible, instead of having to wait and hope that we find it some other way. You know, the immediacy of it has really made some big impacts. I mean, just this past year, I think we've had 3 or 4 incidents where we were able to intercede because of that. And right there alone, to me, proves how great having, you know, Managed Methods as a partner with us, because without it, we could have found out, but it could have taken a lot longer. And with something like that, time is of the essence. So in addition to both of those, which tend to be kind of the, you know, the more sad things that we need to focus on, we have a community ed program here. So we have a whole edition of, you know, adult education that is the entire department's kind of made up of retired folks that technology is not necessarily their strength. And so one of our categories, the PII, as soon as we turned it on, we started seeing credit card images, credit card numbers, because that's their entire process was, oh, we'll just email our order form right over to you to process the order and get us enrolled, and boom, here's all of our information. So just like Ross said, what it really did for us was give us that ability of, hey, let's look at your process. What's working, what's not working, because you guys we've got a very, you know, exposed piece of information that shouldn't be exposed, which was super helpful in just working with the department, instead of, you know, us coming in and saying, hey, you need to completely change your process, and getting pushback of, well, you don't understand what we're doing here and all of these things. It changed the conversation so that it wasn't adversarial, but hey, we see that you guys have a lot of this information. How can we continue to make sure that your students are just as safe as all of our other students are? So that's been a big one. The same thing, and I love Ross's idea of having the email go directly to the user of, hey, look, you just shared this, be careful, because we've got it enabled, but not where it's just communicating right back to them, where we'll reach out. And I mean, we're getting near tax season, so we're starting to see a lot of 1040s and other stuff popping in. And really it's information of, hey, do you know when you put this here, it's much wider than you think it is. And we're trying to partner with you, our staff, our students, of keeping you safe, because anything we're focusing here in our environment is great practice in your own personal environment as well. And so we take it as an opportunity, a learning opportunity of, you know, here's how to protect yourself outside of the district as well. So being able to see all of this stuff has been just unbelievable.
Charles, why don't you explain a little bit what we're looking at here on the screen, give just a high level overview here of what these guys just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So here on the risks tab, this is where the platform is going out and specifically looking for things that exist within the environment itself. So it's going to be looking within Drive files. It's going to be looking within Gmail, shared Drive files. We look in Microsoft as well too. We're here on the Google side. We also look in OneDrive, Outlook, SharePoint, and Teams. And one of the other areas we look at, it's not a very common area we see risks pop up, but Google Classroom announcements. Certainly I've seen some occasions where there have been student-created classrooms that a district's run into before, and they've run into situations where they realized, oh, we've got some students here in a classroom hanging out by themselves there. So is there an issue that way? And then we have the risk scans themselves. So there's PCI, which is going to be looking for credit card numbers, PII looking for social security numbers. We have 2 self-harm models that we run to ensure that if there is something out there with self-harm, there's a pretty good chance it's going to get picked up on. So that's a self-harm machine learning model. So that's an in-house model that we've developed to try to identify potential indications of self-harm. And this one does a good job of looking really at the sentiment and context of things. So if you click into something here, this one here, apologize for the graphic language there, but this one here, as you can see, may get flagged by multiple models. So these models work in conjunction with each other. It's not just going to be one model that might identify something, both models might identify something here. And then you'll have the details of exactly what happened with the incident. So this was sent via email here, so we know who the sender was. We know when this got sent. What was the actual subject there? Or did they attach anything to the email as well too, or is it just an email here? And then you do have the ability to come in here and actually download that email to see what's the full context. Is there anything else in here that I want to take a look at with that email in its entirety? There's also places to take notes here as well too. So if you run into an incident, you can keep a log of what happened with that incident, or as you're in the process of investigating things there. And then we also do have a toxicity risk model here. This is kind of our more behavioral model, looking for things like violent language, inappropriate language, things of that nature. Does a really good job of looking for that kind of thing. And then, as we mentioned before, there is an image risk machine learning model. This looks for either violent or adult images. You may notice that there's a lot of other risk scans filtered throughout here as well too. You can expand beyond that. So the platform is not limited to just what we have out of the box. You can expand beyond that. And each district's a little bit different on what kinds of things you want to have the platform look for. And that's something that there's a lot of customization that's available, which I think is always excellent. So you can really kind of focus your attention on certain things that might be relevant just to your individual district that way.
Yeah, it was Charles, like you click on the gear up there in the enabled risk, as he talked about, it's simply, we have tremendous things already pre-built because we've purpose-built this technology for the last 5-6 years for districts, and we learned so much from birds of a feather work, but it's really kind of infinite. We can look for any kind of content, whether it's through our machine learning, images, or create, regex and keyword and pattern matching. And someone had asked the question in the chat, can we detect bullying? And the answer is yes. But bullying is in different forms and different shapes all around the country, whether it's verbal, the written language, whether it's imagery, whether it's discrimination, hate speech, you name it. It's unfortunate. We live in a society that's right now dealing with a lot of challenges, and those challenges were magnified by the pandemic and the stress and the aftermath of that still today. And so we've learned a lot over the years on how to work with our partners in terms of the school districts to help make this impactful. And Ross, Tony, you both touched on just complete opposite ends of the spectrum that we'll come across. It may be, hey, we need to help the district protect itself because a file got shared in the wrong way, and it contained social security numbers and student IDs, or maybe there's payroll information, or maybe it's a procurement situation. Maybe it was an attachment that came in on an email that contained malware and a threat, and we detected that so it didn't infect the whole environment. So there's tremendous amount of areas all the way from cyber safety to traditional cybersecurity approaches that fall into risk. And we spend, as you talked about, Tony, where we'll come on and do regular audit check-in calls with your team. Our customer success team can spend an entire hour alone just right here talking about how to build out different types of risk profiles. So, to the audience out there, keep bringing the questions. I'm just trying to be courteous of time. We're happy to spend any time with anybody offline to talk about that. So why don't we touch maybe on one more area here as time allows. Let's jump over to a whole different category and talk about access control and who's coming in where on your environment. And this is another big area that we see a lot of. So Tony, I'll stay with you on this one. Have you have you experienced a situation where managed methods has come into play with access control?
It's great you're asking me this, David. So I just was having the conversation again with our administrator on this, and he goes, Tony, I really think we need to look at where we're allowing logins from. He goes, I'm monitoring it. However, do we want to have that conversation? And I think right there, just that piece of it of, hey, let's review these logins, and do we want to allow that, or could this be something that's nefarious? Is right there worth it? During the summer, we see our logins around the world. We've got a very diverse population, so we've got a bunch in Europe. I think our top three that James was telling me about was we have a ton that show up in Mexico, a ton in Poland, and a decent amount in Spain, kind of our top three. And that happens during the summertime, which makes sense. We've got people traveling and out there. But do our students need full access or access to log in from overseas, or are we opening up for that? So that's a conversation we're just now starting to have, but we would have never really had it unless we had seen all of these different logins. We do have obviously rules that tell us if we have quick logins in totally different geographical locations, especially on a lot of our VIP accounts. So, superintendent, HR folks, and see, because we do know they'll be traveling, but if all of a sudden we see multiple logins quick, we know something's going on. So it's really been a key part of our security onion to keep track of those folks. But again, it's giving us the opportunity now to talk and say, oh, what do we want our policy to be? And kind of to what Ross was going back, things have been the wild, wild west. Now we can start to rein them in, but only because we have the information and data.
Ross, I was reaching for the mute button. Ross, do you want to continue on that thread?
No, I echo everything Tony said. It's such a huge piece. Otherwise, if you think you have a breach, Google pops up all the time and says, hey, have you logged into here or something like. It really doesn't give you an insight. And I've worked with Charles on some of this stuff, and which he's been fantastic to help and actually look at this. A lot of it, it's really easy to tell when it's a VPN that's being connected through. That's a huge thing. We used to, I never thought, well, who would want to hack a kid's account? Who would want to do anything with a student's account? These predators don't care. They're just trying to get access to an account on a domain because they just want to keep hitting it until they find one where they can do things they want to do. And so, the accounts do get compromised. Kids, they use their username and password on things they shouldn't, and it's going to, there's a good chance it's going to get compromised. So to be able to see that and be able to track that and really, look to see where they're logging in. And a lot of this, I'm still learning a lot on this. And like I said, last time we had an issue, Charles helped a lot with it. And I'll probably be calling you guys back for some support on some of this because we're still tweaking this. But it's fantastic because you really don't get this anywhere else. You don't get this type of view from the Google environment.
Well, I appreciate that powerful endorsement. And that's what we set out to do. We tried to make this intuitive. And again, it's purpose built for you, this audience. Whereas the tools from Google and Microsoft were designed for the commercial audience with the dedicated, trained and certified administrator, where that's their full-time job or their main function. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what they designed them to do. And we set out to take the best of the technology available to you and create additional technology and design it in an easy to use intuitive package. And you don't have to go get a consulting firm or a training firm to train and make you a certified admin level 1, level 2. You can get those things, and that's great if you have those and have those resources, but we try to make it all encompassing and built into this. And that is built into the product. So, Charles, let's summarize, show them a little bit what they're looking at here, and then I'll share the screen with a link and a bit.ly for people to be able to get access to a free audit, free trial, and we'll wrap up our conversation today.
Excellent. So I came over to the login analyzer. That's, I think, one of the best ways to take a look at login activity. So what this is doing here is it's looking at the various login events that are coming in the Google side of things here. And then there's various ways we can apply different filters in here to focus attention on things. One of the kind of simple filters that I like to run is just looking for the unapproved logins. So by default in the platform, the US is an approved country and the rest of the world is considered unapproved. There are ways you can also adjust that geofencing. Every district's a little bit different. Some districts will add Canada, Mexico, other places where they might have a lot of students traveling or things like that. And then once you've applied that unapproved filter. Now you're looking at the login successes from outside the US here on the Google side. So you can dive into those events individually, see what's going on here. So I'll use this top one here as an example. Also very helpful to understand, how did the user actually get into the account? Did they use their password? Did they use something else to access the account? That's a good idea to understand. A lot of times when we see passwords, sometimes it'll be the student, sometimes it won't be. Thankfully, usually when there's a compromised account, bad actors tend to give things away because they like to jump around a lot. So it won't just be one login event from one place. They'll be hopping over and over and over again. There was recently a district I was working with where they had a bunch of logins all together from the same IP address, but it looked very suspicious. And advisement there was to go in and actually change the user's passwords just to be extra safe, to make sure you don't run into any accounts. Because we've also seen situations where the student accounts have gotten compromised, and then sometimes they'll use it to even go through and just send emails to your entire domain, and they'll just send all kinds of phishing emails or things like that. And then those are internal phishing attacks, and those are extremely difficult to handle. Or I've even seen situations where they've compromised a student account and then they use that student account to email a different domain, not even your domain, and just send phishing emails or things like that. So this is really good to keep a close eye on, because when users are logging in from outside the US, they're using a VPN, they're usually trying to get around something. And if it's not the student doing it, then that account's probably been compromised and there's something wrong there. So this is really valuable in identifying that. And then there's good policies in place too that can help alert you about things. That's not, we didn't really talk about the policy section today, but there's really robust policies to provide alert notifications about here are the important things we've run into. Here are the things that you might want to double check in on and make sure everything's all right there.
Well, thank you for showing us that, Charles. You know, to the audience, again, we could continue on, but we've reached the top of the hour, and we want to be courteous of everyone's day and get you back to it, especially, you know, Tony and Ross for taking so much time to be a part of today's session and where we are. You know, there is so much that
David, I think you muted yourself somehow.
Oh, am I back? Did the sound come back?
Yeah, you're back.
Zoom does that when you share something on the screen, somehow it mutes things out. But we could talk all day long about these different features and functionality. Tony and Ross, I know you guys could sit with folks and talk about this all day because you've experienced the power of managed methods. You know, I'm gonna trademark your comment, Tony. You know, the mountain of mess or whatever you called it. I think, you know, managed methods helps with the mountain of mess. At least we try to help with that. To folks in the audience, we put up a bit.ly on here. You can scan the QR code, or you can just simply go to managedmethods.com, click on the free trial, and we will be happy to help you conduct a free audit, risk, and safety scan of your Google Workspace or your Microsoft 365 online environment. The audience has asked a lot of great questions. I tried to you know, make sure I was answering as many of the questions as I could, but if there's anything you want to know, whether you're a customer on the call, you're a prospective customer, a partner, whatever, feel free to email sales@managedmethods.com or support@managedmethods.com. Say you were in the webinar. Ross, Tony, I don't want to speak for you guys, but if you want to share information or how to reach out to you with the audience, you're certainly welcome to. You obviously are both experts on managed methods, but you also have a lot of just a wealth of knowledge in your roles, and that's part of what we love about working in this industry. Is it's birds of a feather. It takes a village, and if there's anywhere, any market segment that comes together to try and help and look out for one another, it's the education community. We're in this together. When I present at conferences, those of you that know me have heard me say this before, it takes a village. And whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a parent, a vendor, it's our job to help share information and make it readily available. So yes, we want to help you. We have a product here at Managed Methods that we believe can help, but we also know a lot about what you can do with just the free native tools available to you from both Google and Microsoft. They're good companies. They've got good products. They want to help you as well. We just try to bring this all together into the conversation. So Ross, thank you for your time. Tony,
thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate it so much as well. Ross, I hope the grandkid feels better. I know you're doing some double duty today.
Yeah,
Tony,
that's all good. And David, I tell you, if I don't have the ability to like share with the entire audience, if anybody contacts you, if they need help with anything, feel free to share my contact information with them, even if they just want to chat about what we're doing, and I'd be happy to help anybody that would like to ask.
Will do.
Same on my end too.
Tony, I appreciate it. I know for any of you in the audience that are going to be heading to COSIN, the national conference in Austin, Texas next month, Tony's going to be there as well. He's got to skip out early though, because there's a birthday party he's got to get back for. If any of you are in North Carolina or Kentucky or Wisconsin in the next 2 weeks, you might see me there as a part of it. And again, folks, thanks for joining us today. Ross, Tony, and Charles Mogan, as always, thank you, sir, for your support. And folks, have a great day. We appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next webinar for Managed Methods.